I heard from a girl the other day. It was so cool. She said, I am from Africa in Zimbabwe. She says, I work in, she's getting her master's degree in Australia. And she said, I jog every morning and I listen to your Bible study when I'm jogging. And I'm like, okay, that's so cool. So I wrote her back and I said, that's really awesome, but since I am technically with you while you're jogging, I should get some credit for those calories that you're burning. I think that's only fair. Yeah, she probably thinks I'm so weird. Anyway, okay, so I thought this was funny. Someone wrote this. There was this elderly lady, and she was kind of out of shape, and so she knew she needed to start working out again. So she asked her doctor, and he said, yeah, that's fine. And so she decided to join an aerobics class. So she said she got up and she bent and she twisted and she jumped and she perspired for an hour. And she said, but by the time she got her leotards on, the class were over. I thought that was great. I feel that way every morning getting into Spanx. Just an FYI on that. Like, you should see me in the bathroom. So, all right, let's talk Bible. We are in the middle of a series on the life of David. We called it This is Life. And we have two pictures behind us. One is of the desert and one is of the beach, because sometimes our life feels like we are in a desert. Sometimes we feel like we're at the beach. And so that's just life. And so we're learning from the life of David, King David in the Old Testament, how he dealt with it, how he dealt with the ups and downs and the deserts and the beaches of his life. And so today I want to talk to those of you that literally are just tired. And you're tired of it all. And here, for you, you've always done the right thing. And you've done very God-honoring things. And yet, for some weird reason, all of your trials and problems keep coming back over and over and over again. And the person that hurts you keeps hurting you. And the person who gossips about you keeps writing stuff on Facebook about you. And then we look at the bills for you. They keep coming and they don't stop, and they're just over and over and over. And the sickness just doesn't want to go away. And you pray and you ask God to please take it away, and he just doesn't. And then one day you wake up and something happens, and it's like the straw that broke the camel's back. And that is where we find David today. And for some of you, that happens when you realize and you start beginning to think like, you know what? I don't think God's doing a very good job. And I think that he's supposed to take care of me better, and he's not. And so you and I always have a choice when it comes to times like that in our life. And we are going to see what David does with that choice today. Now, to catch us up, King David, he's not king yet. He's been on the run from crazy King Saul. King Saul is the first king of Israel at this particular time. David was running. Saul said, yes, he would stop chasing him. David's all super happy about that. And then something happens that literally just makes David go crazy. Now, what's going to happen is David is so tired of running from Saul. And today we're going to see that Saul comes back into the picture again, and he's going to find out that David's going to find out that Saul actually was lying, and he still is going to chase him. And so what David is going to do now, he's just tired of running from Saul, and so now he's going to run from God. Now, I want you to see these maps up here. You should have a map in your handout. I want you to see that Israel right here, this is the land of Israel, and here, over here, right here, as you'll see over there, is the Philistines. So we're looking at this from two different places today. You have Israel on one side, which is this whole piece right here. This is where David is going to rule and be king over this particular area. The Philistine area is that tan color right there, and we brought it in over here. Now, you would know this whole tan section today as the Gaza Strip. So bad people are still in Gaza Strip, and that's exactly the same way it was back then. So what we see is that David is getting ready to leave the territory of Israel and run into the territory of the Philistines, which is so weird because he just did this a couple weeks ago. That's how he ended up in the cave a couple weeks ago. And so the question we have to ask is, did he not learn his lesson the first time? And the answer is apparently not. And so I want to tell you that for some of you that are sitting here, that it just takes you a little bit longer, like you run away for a little while and then you come back and you run away. I want you to know that this happens to David too. But here's what I want you to know is that there's never any good that comes from running from God. And I want to tell you how that works because of our little dog, Pogo. You see his picture in there, okay? Little Pogo, most of you know the story already. Pogo was the result of Cheyenne when she was in 7th grade pulling the "Daddy, I really want a puppy" card, okay? Now, if you're a mom, you know exactly what that means. That means in 2 days, they're going to hand the puppy to you and say, "I'm not doing this anymore." And now, like, who's going to take care of it, okay? So that's exactly what happened. Cheyenne's like, "Why is this dog waking me up and why is it pooping? And this is ridiculous." So I had to take over. So Pogo has been kind of my dog forever. Pogo is one of those dogs that has 9 lives. He just does. He ran away off into the desert and came back 2 days later. He's this big. We have coyotes everywhere. We have seen Pogo chase coyotes up the mountain. Like, that's how he is. Like, they're scared of him. It's the weirdest thing. So then we lose him in Flagstaff. He gets lost, and we're thinking, oh, he's gone. Nope. A week later, we find him, like, at the Humane Society up there. And so it's like the dog that just never goes away. So we got a phone call while we were on vacation this summer, and the lady staying with the dogs, she called and she said, "Does Pogo go anywhere? Because he's not here." And she said, we left to go to the grocery store and came back, and we can't find him. And I said, "Oh, trust me, he'll be back, okay? That's just Pogo." I said, wherever he went, he finds his way home. Well, 6 days later, he never came home. I know. And so, what was I going to tell you about? 6 days later, he never came home. So we put out signs, and we put his little picture on there, have you seen me? And I actually got 2 phone calls. And someone said, "Yeah, I saw your dog yesterday." And then someone said, "I just saw your dog," and they gave me the address, and I went barreling down there, and it was right on the edge of the desert. And I stood there and called, "Pogo, Pogo." And then it dawned on me that the farther he got out into the desert, he wouldn't be able to hear my voice. It would get smaller and smaller and smaller until he would never be able to hear me and find me again. And I started thinking with that about God. And I thought, you know what? When you and I decide to run from God, what happens is his voice, we thought he was silent before we ran. Now it gets farther and farther and farther because we become so consumed with our own fears and our own anxieties and our own depression. And we're so that we just can't seem to focus on God. And that is where we are going to see from David today. And that's why I love to study people from the Bible, because I want you to know that they're just like you and me. They have their ups and their downs and their silent times. But I want you to know today, if you are one of those people that has walked away from God, that today I'm hoping you know that you are never, ever, ever too far away from him to come home. Okay? That's a really important lesson for you to know. Because if David, a man after God's own heart, walked away from God, and he will leave for 1 year and 4 months on a little sabbatical from God because he's just so frustrated. And yet he makes it back. And if God calls someone a man after his own heart and they leave and come back, you can too. And so I want to make sure you understand that today. Now, last week after this showdown in the cave, David thought everything was fine. He was going to have some relief. And I was thinking about this with you. I thought, you know what? I bet some of you are at that place in your life where you finally feel relief. Like you just got that credit card paid off. You just went to the doctor and they said, you're in remission. Your child stopped doing drugs. Your husband stopped drinking. Like the people that are gossiping about you just aren't gossiping anymore. And you just feel like, yes, I'm so relieved. And you're just at this great, peaceful place at your life. And then one day, out of the blue, something changes everything. And now you get on Facebook and you realize that person started back up again. And you look at your son and you're like, I know he's high again. And you come home and your husband's drunk on the couch again. And the doctor says, no, I'm sorry, it's back. And the question is, you sit back and say, God, what are you doing? Why are you doing this to me? Like you can stop all of this and it's not stopping and I'm getting so frustrated. And for some of you, you are at the breaking point exactly where David is. And for some of you, you just think, you know what, I'm just going to take a little break from God because I'm beginning to think that I can do a better job than him. So let's pick up the story, 1 Samuel chapter 26, and we will start there. So Saul arose and went down to the wilderness of Ziph with 3,000 chosen men of Israel to seek David there. David sent out spies and learned that Saul had actually come, and David arose and came to the place where Saul had encamped, and saw where Saul lay with Abner, son of Ner, commander of his army, and Saul was lying in the encampment with the army encamped around him. And so David gets there, and he looks around the corner because he cannot believe that Saul just lied to him. And yet he did. And David is so frustrated because he's looking at God saying, did I not already pass this test? And I want you to know that life is filled with tests. And God seems to test us one time and then test us again to see if we learned and then test us again. And sometimes I think it's not even so much for God's sake, but for ours. I think when you pass a test and then he tests you again, you can handle it better the second time and you look back and say, wow, I made it again. And you realize spiritually that you're growing in your relationship with God. I thought this was so cute. A teacher she gave her students a test on the human body. And one of the questions was, name one of the major functions of the skin. And one student wrote back and said, to keep people who look at you from throwing up. I thought that was cute because I started thinking, you're right, with no skin, like what would they see? That would be kind of gross. But here's the deal. I think when God tests us, I think a lot of it's just to see how far we have come. Look at Deuteronomy 8:2. In the wilderness with Moses out in the wilderness, this is what God said. Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the wilderness these 40 years to humble and test you in order to know what was in your hand. So David is being tested again, and the question is he going to pass the test, or is he going to take matters into his own hands and run away? Look at verse 7. So David and Abashi, which is David's guy, went to the army by night, and there Saul lay sleeping within the encampment, and his spear stuck in the ground at his head, and Abner and the army lay around about him. Then said Abashi to David, God has given your enemy into your hands this day. Now therefore let me smite him to the earth at once with one stroke of the spear, and I will not strike him twice. Now last week, remember, his men said the same thing, but now David's probably really frustrated, and you could almost get this, maybe he should go ahead and do it, because Abashi's going, look, I know you have a problem with killing him, but I don't. So let's just take the blood off of your hands, David. I'm going to get rid of Saul for you, and we are going to be good to go. But of course, David is David. David said to Abashi, do not destroy him, for who can raise his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? David said, as the Lord lives, he will smite him, or his day will come to die, or he will go down in battle and perish. David really makes it clear. It's not going to be from my hand that Saul dies. It can't be. And we talked about this last week about revenge. It can't be your hand. It's got to be something God does. Verse 11. The Lord forbid that I should raise my hand against the Lord's anointed and take the spear, but now take the spear that is at his head and the bottle of water and let us go. So David took the spear and the bottle of water from Saul's head, and they got away, and no man saw or knew or awakened, for they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from the Lord had fallen upon them. Now, isn't that interesting? That was a very miraculous event that just happened. 3,000 men are encamped around Saul. They're all sleeping. And David and Abashi walk into their camp and no one wakes up. This is a miracle. And I want you to know that that is how big our God is. And for some of you that maybe are new to this Christian thing and you just think God just dropped you down here and he's just letting you do whatever, that's not true. God is powerful and mighty, and when you ask him to come into your life, this is a power that you can't even imagine. God does miraculous things. And when you start getting this idea and view that he is that big, your life will completely change. I will tell you that. Because suddenly you won't worry about the things that you worried about before as much. Now, I'll tell you, this happened with our house. I told you a couple weeks ago, we've lived in our house, 25, 30 years, I don't know. And we raised our kids there, and it's a fun house. And when the kids are there, it's just a lot of fun. But Rob and I now are empty nesters. Our last one just went to college, so it's he and I. And we just stare at each other. We're like, okay, but we don't need this house anymore. And so we decided to put it up on the market, and we did. And then we had a party the other night for the kids when the guy from China was in. All the kids were there, and the grandkids, they were all running around. And that night I went to bed, and I said, Rob, I don't know if we should sell our house. Like, this is our family home. And so I started worrying about it. And I stopped, and I just said, God, here's the deal. You are so big that if you want me to sell the house, you will bring along a buyer. And if you don't want us to sell it, then you will make sure no one ever knows about this property. Like, God is just that big. And yet we don't think that. We just think like, oh, and I would have normally, like 5 years ago, just sat in bed and worried about it. But I'm like, God, my life is yours. You want us to move, you do it. If not, we're good with whatever you decide to do. Well, last week, the only reason why we sold our house is because I found one house I want. That's it, one house. It's in the exact area. It's the only house on the market in there, and I'm super excited. It's been on the market forever, so I'm like, it'll be there. Last week, we got online to look at it. It's off the market. Okay. So we called the real estate agent, and we're trying to work with them, and she said no, anyway, whatever. But here's my point to the whole thing. If God wants me in that house, he's going to make sure that those buyers let us buy it. And he's going to bring a lot. That's just God. And see, that's what I want you to realize is that we serve a really big God that can do anything. And when you get that, it really will change your life. But some of you are here and you're saying, but Lisa, I've been waiting. I've been waiting for God to do something miraculous and he's not, and I'm frustrated. And my question to you is the choice that we all have. Are you going to wait on God or are you going to run away from him? Because that is always our choice. Look what David does. Then David went to the other side of the mountain, and he stood on the top of the mountain afar, and a great space between them, and he begins to taunt Abner. David called to the army, and Abner, son of Ner, "Will you answer, Abner?" Abner replied, "Who are you, calling and disturbing the king?" And Saul knew David's voice and said, "Is this your voice, my son David?" And David said, "My voice, my lord, O king." And David said, "Why does my lord thus pursue his servant? What have I done, or what evil is in my hand tonight?" So he did the same thing as he did last time in the cave. And Saul said, "I have sinned, return my son, for I will no more do you harm, because my life was precious in your eyes this day. Behold, I have played the fool and have erred exceedingly." Now, I would say David passed 100% on this test. And we look at this and we say, "Yay, David, you're so awesome. Now you can just go and relax." But I will tell you, this was the straw that broke the camel's back for David. And I don't know what it was. Something in him just snapped. And suddenly he lost all of his confidence in God. And he didn't believe any longer that God would take care of him. And some of you are at that place in your life right now where you're just like, I just don't believe God's going to bring along that guy for me. So I'm just going to go ahead and marry this guy over here just because he's the only one there. Some of you are tired of being broke and not being able to go shopping. So you just go get that credit card and run it up because you're just tired of it all. Some of you are tired of being in a loveless marriage. And so you just decide, I'm just going to get out because I just don't think God is in this any longer. And all of our life, we have these choices, and somehow we lose our confidence that God really does know what he's doing. And he really does have a plan. Our job is just to wait on him. But David didn't. David suddenly went inward. He became so fearful that Saul was going to come and kill him. And he was terrified. You can see this in 1 Samuel 27. But David said in his heart, look at all these pronouns, "I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me than that I should escape into the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will despair of seeking me more within the borders of Israel, and I shall escape out of his hand." And it's at this point that we see David make this huge turn, because suddenly he's looking at me and I'm scared, and all of the eyes, and he's forgotten to say, "But God." This is how that should have read. David should have said, but David said in his heart, "I will never perish until God is ready to take me home. God has protected me from Saul all of these years, and he has called me to be king in his timing, and I will stay right here and let God protect me like he always has." And that's going to be your choice and mine. And I want you, when you start hitting these trials over and over again, to stop and say, oh my gosh, am I seeking God, or am I going inward? Look at Psalms 34:4. "I sought the Lord, and he answered me and delivered me from all my fears." The first thing you and I have to do when we get hit with a trial over and over and over again is stop, and don't go inward, but go upward and say, "God, I'm seeking you on this," because otherwise our fear will take over and we will run. There's a story of a small congregation. One of their church members died. It was the guy who owned the property that the church was on. He willed this property to him, so they built a bigger church on there. And they were so excited because they'd prayed about that and they just knew God was in it. And it came time for about 10 days before the grand opening of their church. And a building inspector showed up to the pastor and said, "I'm sorry, you can't open your church." because the parking lot is inadequate. It's too small for the building, and until you make it bigger. Well, the problem is this property backed up to a mountain. There was no property except the mountain that they owned. And they didn't know what to do. And here the pastor has a choice, just like you and I do when your world just starts crumbling around you and you're just like, I don't understand why this is happening. And the pastor could have said, I'm just done with God. We've prayed about this and he's not coming through and I'm tired of this and I'm just tired of it all. And he could have walked out the door never to come back. Or he could do what he did. He announced that night at church that they would have a big prayer meeting that Sunday night. And he said, I want everyone to show up, and 25 out of the 300 people showed up to pray. He said, we are going to do mountain moving prayer because we need that mountain to move if we want to open these doors. And so they prayed, and the next morning, the pastor was in his office, and he heard a knock on his door, and he opened it, and there was a rough-looking construction foreman standing in front of him, and he said, excuse me, Pastor, I'm from the Acme Construction Company, and I'm from the next county over. We're building this huge mall. And he said, we just ran out of fill dirt. And he said, we don't know where to go. And we came by and we saw your church and this mountain. And he said, could we purchase part of your mountain? He said, we will come in. We will dig out what we need for fill dirt. He said, we will pave whatever you need us to pave. And he said, a week later, they opened the church. And see, that is the kind of God that we have. And if the pastor would have run away, he never would have seen the blessing. And some of you, if you run away from your marriage or you run away from whatever your job or whatever it is, you're never going to see the blessing. So stay and wait for God and go upward and not inward. David did not wait to see what would happen. So he goes on the run. Look at verse 2. So David arose and went over with 600 men who were with him to Achish, son of Maoch, king of Gath. Now, if you look at your whatever this is called, map, you see Jerusalem in the rust part, and you see Gath right there in the tan part. So David crosses borders, and he goes into the Philistine country. Now, you have to remember, this is the Philistines. They were evil. They were wicked. This is where Goliath came from. David killed Goliath, their main guy. Now, this is the same place we saw David go to a couple weeks ago where he was like drooling on his beard and acting like he was insane because he was scared once again. It's crazy. And sometimes we get so fearful that we do dumb things. And for David, he was so fearful of Saul that he ran into enemy territory to get away from him. And some of you are doing the same thing. You're so fearful that you don't have enough money, so you're going to start doing things illegally, lying on your taxes, doing things under the table, whatever that looks like, because you're so afraid of not having money. Some of you are so afraid of losing your job that your boss is asking you to lie and you're doing it. And some of you are so fearful that you're going to get a bad grade on your test, so you start to cheat. Because it is so amazing what fear can do. Fear literally takes over. It makes us irrational. We take our eyes off of God. We take matters into our own hands. Fear makes us somehow move into a place where we think we can control things. And David thinks he can control Saul in his life if he just moves into enemy territory. And can I just tell something to you that some of you, if you're control freaks, you're going to hate this with everything in you. Here's the deal. You have no control over anything in this world. And we think we do. We honestly do. But when you get to the point in your life where you realize that, see, here's the deal. You have no control over when you were born. You have no control over who your parents were. You have no control over the weather. If you're going to get into that school, if you're going to get that job. And some of you are like, no, I got that job because I'm smart. No, God is so big, he can override that anytime he wants to. Ultimately, he's in control. Now, our job is to come under and submit to that. We have no control over airplane crashes or car crashes or people loving you or people leaving you or if you get cancer or if you have arthritis or when you're going to die or when somebody else is going to die. You have no control over any of that. And so many of you are so fearful, I don't want to get into that car. I don't want to get on that plane because I'm afraid it's going to crash. I'm afraid to be around people because I'm afraid I'm going to get germs. And God wants you to stop because he wants you to live in peace, knowing that he controls it all. And I never knew that, but the minute I grasped that God was sovereign over everything that happened, it changed my life. And I just don't worry about stuff the way I used to. Now, you're going to laugh at this. My parents said the other day, they called Saturday, they said, hey, let's go to a movie. Rob is out of town. I always say that. It sounds like my husband's out of town all the time. He's really not, but he just happened to be on Saturday. So my mom and dad and I went to the movie theater. I was late picking them up. We get there, the movie starts. It's a Western. It's the Magnificent Seven. So there's just kind of a certain look of people that maybe goes to Westerns. Like, and I don't know what it is. So we go in there, and everything's already started. The previews have already started. And so we go find our seats. The whole theater's packed. We go to sit down. Dad, Mom, me, and an empty seat with a big old backpack, and no one's sitting there. And I looked at the guy, and he looks at me, and he said, I have no idea whose backpack that is. It's been sitting here since we got here. And I said, okay, well, I don't mean to be all weird, but someone probably needs to go get security. That might be a good idea. And so they go down to security, and I am standing there with my mom and dad thinking, do I take them away? What do we do? Do I need to act normal? I just didn't know what to do. So a few minutes later, the guy who owns the backpack came in. Now, I'm not a big racial profiler, okay? But I kind of was that day, because it was so abnormal. Cheyenne said she went into a movie theater one time, late night, a kid's movie, and a guy in a hoodie or a black trench coat by himself was sitting there. Okay, it was kind of like that. He was of a completely different race, which is fine. I'm not racist at all, but you're taught on the news to just kind of watch out for stuff like that. He had this big backpack, and he just sat down and sat it on his lap. And I'm like thinking, I couldn't even concentrate for the stupid movie because I'm thinking, I got to protect my mom and dad. But I finally calmed down and I said, God, here's the deal. You know what's in that backpack? And I'm asking you if it's a bomb, that you please disarm it now, okay? Before it goes on. I looked at my mom and she goes, well, if we go, I guess we're going together. And about 10 minutes into it, he starts laughing at the movie and I'm like, wow, he's probably really here for the movie. And then after we left, Mom goes, I kept thinking, well, maybe he's just waiting to see the end of the movie before he sets the bomb off, okay? It was just so creepy weird. But anyway, I'm just saying that there's this fear that comes in, but I ultimately said, God, if there's something bad in there and you need us to get out, you need to let me know. Because remember, we have the Spirit of God living with us. He will let us know if there's something dangerous that we need to get away from immediately. I never felt that. The second thing was this summer when we were flying. I don't know, I'm never worried about turbulence. I don't even think about it. The plane dipped. And it was the first time that I said, wow, I think we're going to crash, okay? It was kind of a weird feeling, but it lasted for a second because this is what I said, God, here's the deal. My life is yours. And I know you know that I'm on this plane. And I know you know who controls this plane. And I know you know what's going on in this plane. And because I know that, I can have peace. Because here's the deal, if it's my day to die, please make it not painful, because I don't like pain, okay? But more than that, I'll see you in a few. That was kind of my thought, okay? But we can live with that kind of peace and comfort in this world that's just filled with terrorists and crazy people. And we can because I know that God is going to be in control of everything that happens in my life. And there's peace in that. So many people are so worried about their children. I had this with Cheyenne the other day. She went on a date Saturday night. Did not even know the guy. Knew nothing about him. Usually she'll text me afterwards like, yay, thumbs up, thumbs down. I got no text by the time I woke up in the morning. So I text her, nothing. I called her, nothing. And I know we have to be at church because we work together we have to be there early. So I know she has to be on her way. I get on Find My Friends because I'm like, I'm going to find her, okay? It says, cannot find your friend. And I sat there and said, okay, he's killed her. She's in the desert, she's dead. She's crying for me. I mean, whatever, your minds just go crazy, okay? But I had to stop and say, God, you know that Cheyenne is your child. And you know where she is, and I don't, and I need you to protect her wherever she is. See, we can go so inward and forget to go upward that we are miserable. And God doesn't want that to happen. We're so worried about germs and presidents, the debate, for the love, the economy. We're so worried about so many things, but here's the deal. You are in control of none of it, and that's a good thing. That's a really, really good thing. For those of you that don't like what I just said about that, here's what I want to tell you if you don't know this. You can have a relationship with the one who does control it all, and that is Jesus. Because God created this world, but we're kind of a mess here. And he says there's only one way to get to heaven, and that's through Jesus alone. And when you become a follower of Jesus, you become a part of the family of God. And God says, I will take care and control what's going on in your life. Now, that does not mean that everything's always going to go good. I do want you to know that right now. Because so often we hear that, everything's going to go great if you just ask Jesus in your life, and that's not always true. We live in a fallen world that's filled with sin, but that doesn't mean that God does not cause or allow every single thing that happens in this world. And when you get that, when you look at bad and you say, well, why did God cause that? Maybe he just allowed it. Why? Next week we'll talk about the Twin Towers with Sujo. God, why did God allow that? I don't know the answer to a lot of that, but I do know that there's comfort in knowing that God controls what is going on. Now, here's what I do know. When you become a follower of Jesus, you have that assurance that everything works together for good for those who love God. With that in mind, you can walk through this earth knowing that no matter what bad happens to you, that God can use it for good. And there's comfort in that. Look at Isaiah 41:10. I thought this was the coolest verse. Instead of worrying and fear, this is what you can have in this world. Fear not, God says, there is nothing to fear, for I am with you. Do not look around you in terror and be dismayed, for I am your God. I love this. Look at this. I will strengthen and harden you to difficulties. Yes, I will help you. Yes, I will hold you and retain you. He will strengthen and harden us to difficulties, which means it's kind of like we had a friend yesterday who called and said, I need you to pray for my husband because he's going someplace that is going to be very difficult for him. And my prayer was, God, I want you to put a protection of like a turtle around him. Like that hard turtle shell that no matter what anyone says or does to him, that he's hardened by it and it doesn't affect him. And that is a promise that God has. And so what I want you to know is that as we go through this world, you're going to have bad things that happen. That's just the given for living in this world. But God says, I will be with you and I will get you through. I will give you the strength so you're okay. So that's why we can have peace. But here's what I want you to know. That does not minimize that you and I feel pain. When we lost our little dog, as stupid as this sounds, we got back home Monday. I'm used to my cute little dog coming out and running when he sees my car, and he wasn't there. And the next day, Dusty was going away to Costa Rica. Rob was out of the country. I went over to my mom's house to drop off something, and I sat down and just burst into tears. And I'm just like, Mom, I feel so guilty. I feel like it's my fault. I feel like my dog was murdered by who knows what, a coyote. He was kidnapped by a crazy neighbor. I don't know where he is, and I should have left him in the house. I should have taken more care. I should have. And there's all of this guilt and all this sadness, and all I could do was cry. And then I got in my car and went to Walmart and cried the entire way through Walmart. And I kept thinking, I hope no one from Bible studies is here to see this. I couldn't stop crying. And I thought I'd be better the next morning. Nope, got up. It's a dog, for crying out loud. And some of you are like, Lisa, that's so stupid, because I get this. You've lost people. And you've lost friends and husbands and parents and love. You've lost that. And I'm crying over a dumb little dog. But I want you to know that just because we know that God is in control does not mean we don't have emotions. And that's okay. There was lots of, David cried a lot. Look at 1 Samuel 15:30. But David continued to the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went. Matthew 26, here's Peter, big brash Peter. Then Peter remembered the words Jesus had spoken. He went outside and wept bitterly. Even Jesus cried. Luke 19:41, as he approached Jerusalem, he saw the city and wept over it. There are 200 references to godly men crying and weeping all the time. So God has no problem crying and weeping. But here is what Rob said when I was talking to him about this. I said, Rob, where do I go with this? And he said, Lisa, here's the deal. After the heartache and after the hurt and after the tragedy, where do you rest? Do you rest in your faith or do you rest in your flesh? And that will always be the question that we have to answer. Because David could have rested in his faith. And he could have said, God, I know Saul's still after me, but I'm going to stay in Israel. And I'm going to just stay put and be where you want me to be. And I'm going to trust you're going to take care of me. But David didn't. His flesh took over. He rested in his flesh. His flesh said, go be scared, go be fearful, go be frightened. And he ran into Philistine territory. Look at verse 3. And David dwelt with Achish at Gath, he and his men, every man in his household. Think about this. David had 600 men with him and all their wives and their children and everyone now are living in Philistine territory and they are Israelites and David is going to be the king of Israel. Like none of this even makes any sense. Verse 6, then Achish gave David the town of Ziklag that day, and the time David dwelt in the Philistine country was 1 year and 4 months. So David thinks, this is awesome. I have a home. I have a job. And you know what his job was? The Philistine king would say, hey, David, I want you to go do raids on Israel, your town. And that was David's job, to go raid towns, kill people. But here's what David was doing. He wasn't doing that. Look at verse 6. Now David and his men went up and made attacks on the Geshurites, Girzites, and Amalekites, which are enemies of Israel. So here David was living in Philistine territory. Now remember, this is a man after God's own heart. Living in Philistine territory, working against that king, lying to him, telling him he's doing, everything about what David's doing is insanity. Verse 9, and David smote the land and left neither man nor woman alive, and took away the sheep, oxen, donkeys, camels, and the apparel, and returned to Achish. And when Achish asked, where did you go raiding today? David would say, and I will say this, David would lie. And he would lie to Achish and tell him places that he really didn't. And David did not leave a man or a woman alive to bring to Gath, saying, otherwise they'll tell about us. David is on this craziness, and here's what happens. He's rationalizing everything that he's doing. And when you and I start doing stupid things, we begin to rationalize what's happening. And we say, you know what? It's okay that I live with my boyfriend. It's fine. It's no big deal. We can have sex. It's just whatever. God won't care. Well, we rationalize it. But we get along better when we're living together. Rationalization. What about, I just want to go out and have fun on Friday and Saturday and drink, and I get drunk on Friday and Saturday, but you know what? The other 5 nights I'm fine. God should be fine with that. We rationalize. Lying for my boss. I don't mind lying for my boss because he gives me a good bonus, and you know what? I tithe off that bonus. So we can rationalize anything we want. And that's really, really awesome until it isn't anymore. A lady told her pastor one time, she started rationalizing that she screams and yells at people and she just gives this angry outburst. And the pastor came to her and she said, there's nothing wrong with my temper. She says, I blow up and then it's all over. And he said, well, so does a shotgun. And she said, look what the damage it does when you shoot a shotgun, what damage it leaves behind. And see, that's where we find David. We find David where it's about ready to get over. Because here's what I want you to know. It's about ready to blow up in his face, because consequences for you and I as a follower of Jesus are often delayed. It's been 1 year and 4 months, but they are inevitable. And I want you to know that. If you're on the run and you say you're a follower of Jesus, here's the deal. Your consequences are going to be delayed if they haven't already started, but they are inevitable. They will come up, because God will not let you get away with things if you say that you're a child of his. Look at Hebrews 12:6. For the Lord corrects and disciplines everyone whom he loves, and he punishes, even scourges every son whom he accepts and welcomes to his heart and cherishes. Now, if you are exempt from correction and left without discipline in which all of God's children share, then you are illegitimate offspring and not true sons at all. He's saying that if you are here and you can sit there and sin, and it's been year after year after year, and you've never been corrected, and you feel no guilt, and you feel nothing, and then you probably are not really his child. And I think that's something. Now, on the offhand of that, we do have days where we go off and we do stupid stuff like David, but eventually God will discipline you because you are his child. If I don't discipline my children, shame on me, because they're going to be a mess. So David thinks he's getting away with it until this happens. 1 Samuel 29, verse 1. Now the Philistines gathered all their forces at Aphek, and the Israelites encamped by the fountain of Jezreel. All right, so here's what's happening. Here's my little army over here. See my little army men? They're like Revolutionary War army men, because that's all I could find. This is Israel's army. Here is the Philistines' army. They're like from another time period. I'm not certain which one. Here's what's going on. The Philistines are getting ready to raid the Israelites. King Saul is running this over here, and David is over here. And this is a big deal. And so look at verse 2. As the Philistine lords were passing on by hundreds and thousands, and David and his men were in the rear with Achish over here on the Philistine side, the Philistine princes said, "What are these Hebrews doing here?" Achish said to the Philistine princes, "Is not this David, the servant of Saul from over there, who has been with me since these days and years? I found no fault in him since he deserted to me this day." The king is saying, here's the deal. He deserted over here to me, and he's been on my side the whole time. He has no idea what David's been doing. And the Philistine princes were angry, and they told him to make him go away. And so Achish says, "David, you need to leave. You need to go away." And of course, then David starts whining and carrying on and putting on this big show, like, "Why me? I've been a servant of yours," and blah, blah, blah. And he ends up leaving. Here's the deal. He's been lying and deceiving to people. And I want to just tell you that if you're here and you've been lying to people and deceiving people and you drink too much and slept around and had too many abortions and too many divorces and whatever it is, I think a lot of times you think that you can never come back from that. And you think God has just kind of forgotten about you. And I want you to know that David and this scene shows us right here that is absolutely not true. God knew exactly where David was the entire time, and now a year and 4 months later, God says, enough is enough. It's time to come home and get your act together. And so God allows something bad to happen into David's life, and sometimes that happens in our life. Something bad will happen to shake us, to wake us up, to make us go, I got to get back to God. And you can imagine David as he's coming back to his little place in Ziklag, and he's laughing with his army guys, or his 600 men, and he's saying, wow, we dodged a bullet. Isn't it so awesome that we didn't have to go fight the Israelites? That would have been bad. What would we have done? Like, that would have been a bad deal. Ha, ha, ha. And he was probably laughing until they saw this. 1 Samuel 30, verse 1. Now when David and his men came home to Ziklag on the third day, they found that the Amalekites had made a raid on the south of Negeb and on Ziklag, and had struck Ziklag and burned it with fire. They had taken their women and all who were there, both great and small, captive. They killed no one, but carried them off and went on their way. So David and his men came to the town. Behold, it was burned. Their wives and sons and daughters were taken captive. It is time for David to get back and start doing something he has not done in a long time, and stop looking within and start looking up. And that's exactly what David does in verse 6. He said, but David encouraged and strengthened himself in the Lord his God. So David went, he and his 600 men with him, and David smote them. He found the bad guys from twilight, killed them all, verse 18, recovered everything, had taken, rescued his 2 wives. Nothing was missing, small or great, sons or daughters, but David recovered it all. And David is back. And God did that by taking away and removing something from David that David should never have had in the first place, Ziklag. And for some of you here, God may do something like remove that guy from you that you know you should not be with. Maybe God will remove that job from you that you know you shouldn't be at. Maybe the friend that isn't a great friend to you because you always get in trouble with this friend. And David looked up and finally stopped his 1.4 years on the run. And you know this battle here between Israel and the Philistines, guess what happened? The Philistines shot an arrow, and guess who it went to? King Saul. King Saul died in this particular battle, dead. And it didn't even come by David's hand. Remember the revenge thing? God did it himself on his timing. I thought this was cute. A man said to his physician, the physician said to a man, yes, you have rabies. And the man didn't know what to do, so he took out a pad of paper and he started writing. And the doctor said, you don't have to worry about this. Like, it's not like, there's a cure for rabies. It's not like you have to write your will and testament out. And the man said, no, I know that. He said, but I'm just making a list of all the people I'm going to bite. Aww. But that's the point. You don't have to bite anyone, and you don't have to try to get back at anyone. God will take care of it, and we just saw that with what just happened. Saul is now dead, and it had nothing to do with David. And so the lesson today is this. When you get tired of it all, you have a choice. And your choice is going to be run like David did from Israel into the Philistine area and just do some damage and hurt people along the way. Because when you run from God, you always leave a trail of hurt and pain behind you. That's just the way it happens. That's what happened. David could have gotten 600 men killed all the wives, all the children. That could have been a massacre, all because David went on the run and walked away from God. And David would never, none of this would happen if he stayed in Israel and focused on God and trusted him. And so here's what I want to leave you with today, and with a question. When whatever you're tired of, whatever you're just tired of happening in your life, what are you going to do? Because your job is going to be to rest in your faith and just say, God, I'm going to stick this out until the end until you make things better, or your flesh, where you're going to run and be fearful and anxious, because that will always be our choice. And what we learned from David today is don't run, stay there and focus on God. Father, thank you so much for your word. Thank you for the life of David. He's so amazing to me. He's so up and he's so down, and he loves you and then he runs from you. And I think it's just so much of our life. And thank you for making us realize that as people and as followers of Jesus, that can happen to us too. But I pray for anyone here that's on the run, that they will stop today, knowing that you know exactly where they are and you want them back. And for those that are here, God, that are tired, they're tired of the cancer, they're tired of the marriage, they're tired of everything. God, help them to focus on you and not their fears, knowing you know exactly what's going on because you are in control of it all. Thank you for these women. God, I love them so much, and I'm so grateful to each and every one of them. Bless them as they leave today in Jesus' name. Amen. And maybe you're going to struggle every single day of your life with the situation that you have. Maybe you wouldn't yell at your kids. But do you gossip at all the girls? Okay, maybe you wouldn't wear those skinny, but it's so true. It's like, what do people say about Christians? You're so judgmental. As we progress in our relationship with Christ, our lives will change. And now, instead of judging, when you believe the Bible and the Bible alone, I said, that's what we live for, is just this one